Hey, this is the imagination industry. In this podcast, we have this motto. Our tagline is decoding creativity, monetization, and everything in between, which technically means that we are trying to explore what defines a creator, why and how creators create, how they shape culture, how they build their audiences, how they earn money, and how inevitably they become this driving force behind what we commonly know as the creator economy. I'm pretty sure our guest today has a lot of answers to these questions. And to introduce our guest, over to you, my friend.
When we started talking about this podcast, actually, you were one of the first people that, your name came to my mind. When I was introduced to Philosopher's Minis, I actually binge watched it. And I did it in multiple occasions. For me, it's better than Netflix. I really love the show, so I'm a huge fan here. I will try to cool down. I'll try to cool down throughout the episodes. But I believe you have such a rare gift of making complex stuff accessible and simple and human, and I love that. So yes, welcome to our show. We are very excited.
Oh, thank you very much. That's insanely kind. And as a Brit, I don't do very well with praise, but I'll have to accept it for what it is and accept the gift. And it's very nice of you to say that, and it's very kind of you to say that. And if Netflix are listening, then I am up for a Netflix show as well. If they want to.
I mean, we're all hope that Netflix are listening, please.
Yes, give you guys a show. Yeah, we'll all go on together.
We can do it together. Mm-hmm. You are actually, when I introduce you from my personal lens, but when someone is learning about you, you are a teacher, both English and philosophy, and I imagine some other subjects as well. You wrote 3 books. You are a publicist in Big Thing, which is big thing as well. I always wanted to make that joke. And you are a content creator. You have multiple channels when you introduce people to philosophy. How you actually feel about yourself when you introduce yourself on a party or to some strangers? How you describe yourself?
This is good. It's a good question because this comes up surprisingly often when I'm talking to my friends about this. And when I meet someone new, I say, like, what are you doing? What do you do for a living? And I kind of oscillate. I kind of change between saying either I'm a writer or I'm an author. But of course, the second you dig into it, it's much deeper or broader than that. And so I have this slightly ongoing joke. I used to refer to myself as as a public philosopher. But that's not quite true because I'm not a philosopher at university and I'm not kind of doing my own ideas. In some ways, I'm kind of distilling and explaining other people's ideas. You can still be a philosopher and do that. And then I said that I should maybe call myself a public intellectual. But then it's a bit too wanky. You might edit that out if it's a bit too rude, but it's really pretentious. If you refer, for a start, you can't. If you refer to yourself as a public intellectual, it's the height of arrogance. And even if you met somebody who was, I went to a party the other night and I spoke to a public intellectual, you'd think, okay, well, that wasn't a fun night. So I tend to talk. I tend to say I'm just a writer. Writer is the broadest way of doing it because writer incorporates both my big think stuff and my writing stuff on my books. But also, I think, being a big part of a content creator is, for me at least, is writing. I know some content creators are completely off the hoof. They completely spontaneously talk to camera and it's like, right, I've got an idea, let's do it. Whereas what I'm like is I definitely script my stuff first and I have to edit my stuff first and I do about 17 takes. So my writing, the word writer incorporates a lot of elements. So I settle on writer, but it is a good question. It comes up quite a lot. But my arrogance wants to let people know that I do have this social media as well. So I kind of say I'm a writer. Yeah, follow me on Instagram, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm kind of a content creator as well. Because even though a content creator is quite value laden, isn't it? Like, so if you say I'm a content creator, people probably think you're in, you do like yoga or kind of like fitness or health and well-being and stuff. And actually, that's the subject of we might talk about it later. But it's an interesting thing that philosophy and education creators, they don't have their own category. Like if you sign up on things like TikTok and Instagram, it's kind of like, what category do I belong to as a creator? There is no option for education and philosophy or even like non-fiction book stuff. You think there's a books one, even often they don't have books. It's just all about well-being, cars, and things like that. Yeah, so yeah, that's where I'm at. So long answer, and that is long answer. And the short answer is I'm a writer or an author.
Let's dive into the other side that you mentioned, that you're a content creator as well, right? So
yes.
we're here trying to actually map out this category of creators and this creator economy, hence the podcast, hence our conversation right now. So let's try and describe the category itself. How do you define a creator today? How do you see the difference between creators and influencers or artists, and where do you see yourself in that mix?
Well, the artist question is an interesting one, and I like to say there's a broad category of art. I think it is often a lot of content created is a form of art, especially if you refer to people writing articles or even books as artists, or even like just doing postcards or pictures or whatever as artists. I think content creation is a kind of art, and it's only now that I call myself, or I am in the business of content creation, do I now appreciate how much effort and skill goes into content creation. Like, it's easy to look out from the outside in at Instagram or TikTokers and say, oh, anyone could do that. How can they make a living by, doing a dance on top of a roof in the sunset, whatever stuff. But the truth is, you can't. Not everyone can do that. If everybody could do that, everybody would be doing that. It actually does take a lot of skill and talent to be able to, condense something into such a short period of time. But I mean, so what is a content creator? At its bare minimum, is someone who's creating content. Obviously, but that's a boring answer. But I think the art is, in some way, what I do is with my education, my philosophy is kind of distilling. As a content creator, that you have 3 seconds of somebody's attention. And so as a content creator, your first trick and your first art is to make something which is interesting and engaging. It's clickbait for the visual age. It's visual bait. You want to try to grab someone's attention in 3 seconds. And then from there, you have to keep them engaged for ideally 90 seconds, but no one ever probably watches 90 seconds. Even my most avid fans will probably stop watching around 60 seconds, and that's okay. And Instagram, TikTok, Meta, and YouTube, they all know that. They all know that most people will stop watching after a certain period of time. So a content creator, I think, is someone who's mastered the ability to condense something interesting into a very short period of time and to keep somebody engaged. I think it's a talent that content creators have. I mean, and it is a hard thing to do, to make it new all the time. And there are loads of things online about how to keep people engaged for 3 seconds and what little tricks and tips, what to say, what to wear, what to do, and things like that. But ultimately, I think it's a skill, it's a talent. You have to learn it, really. So that's my long answer to a good question. Yeah.
Do you find this thing with packing something as sophisticated as philosophy into this 3-second bits, because of our attention span is obviously, not getting any bigger, it's just diminishing, if anything. Do you find it, a nice intellectual challenge, or do you find it a sad necessity of our current times?
I do find it an intellectual challenge, yes. But as you mentioned at the start of the show, I was a teacher once, and when you're a teacher, particularly for young children, if you lose the engagement and stuff like that, and it is also true to an extent that a lot of philosophers and a lot of writers generally, particularly before modern times, they needed a good editor. Sometimes an idea can be expressed in a simple, straightforward way, and without reducing it too much. But yes, my ideas are distilled, they are reduced, and a lot of the nuance is lost. But what I like to hope is that I try to sit on the fence in the good kind of way. I try to not make my own opinions or what the good or the bad of the arguments too explicit. I try to say, this is an argument. This is just the bare bones of the argument. And if you like this, go away and read it and find out about it. But yeah, it is a kind of distilling, and it's an intellectual challenge. And I enjoy it. And for me, that this job is so brilliant in that I do get to spend so much of my time researching on JSTOR text. So JSTOR is like an article website which you have to subscribe to. You get some free ones, textbooks, and I like to read it, and I like to then say, okay, right, what's the starter, what's the introduction to this, right, here's the point, let's go and talk about it. And in some ways it's sad that I'm missing the go away and talk about it bit, and that's the comment section. I think to be honest, that's why people quite enjoy what I'm doing. Is that what I am doing is I am the facilitator, I'm the teacher, I'm the person saying, right guys, sit down, pencils out, paper out, here's the idea, now over to you guys, let's talk about it. I think I do have that school teachery vibe, and I think people quite like that. So but yeah, it is a challenge, and obviously sometimes I feel like I've failed, both in distilling the thing, and I've said this to people, sometimes I've done something which is misrepresented the point to the point, as I've oversimplified to the point of misrepresenting, and I have sometimes either deleted a video for that reason, or I've mentioned in the comments that, look guys, fair play, I missed this nuance in it, which is actually quite an important nuance, which makes a big difference to the actual idea. Or I feel also sometimes that people assume that what I'm doing is actual philosophy, but you do need to go away and read the books. You do need to go away and read philosophy in its context and long form reading, because the act of reading itself is a kind of meditation, it's kind of stilling, it's a kind of reflection. So Yeah, again, sorry. I'm always a long answer kind of person, so you've got to jump in and tell me to stop
No, I love
rambling.
it. I love it actually.
Okay.
I have a lot of, other thoughts and other ideas, and actually I'm recreated how I'm consuming the content you are producing. And I do agree with the reflection part, like that it's needed. So I do binge watch it, as I mentioned, but I also sometimes come back to some, I think mostly to articles more than the videos, because videos are very short, but with the article I spend much more time. And then, yeah.
Yeah, and the
Um,
process of reading is very different to the process of watching. Sorry. Carry
yeah,
on.
yeah. That's very true. We want to understand more the business parts of what you are doing, your career. And when I was doing research, I've read somewhere or heard when you were talking how you started working with Big Thing. So actually, you started promoting your book, and then you were going out and doing all kind of stuff to be heard and known and visible, which is fantastic story, by the way. But then I was thinking how many other things you did, or like, because being there, putting your face out there, doing the video, I think it must be a huge jump from going to school and teaching kids. You have, I don't know how many kids you have in UK in a class, but then you have millions people watching you.
Ooh.
What was the craziest thing you did to promote yourself, and how do you feel about it? Is it natural, or this is
It's a good
something you
question.
needed?
I mean, in some ways, I was. The reason it came after I was teaching is when you're a teacher, you have this. You're drilled in this idea that you cannot put your face on social media and the public view because it's illegal or it's against the rules, school rule, as in the employment laws in some schools, and in some areas it could be illegal if you post things about drinking or sex or fighting, whatever. Kids find it, and then you're fired from your job. So most teachers are pathologically afraid of putting their face or anything biographical or personal on the internet. But then I did this thing, and I mean, to be frank, I didn't think it was going to take off as much as it did. I thought it would be like an extension of where I was. When I started doing videos, I had about 70,000, maybe 80,000 followers. Nice, but not that big. And then suddenly, my first few videos just took off, and I went from there and things. And I mean, I am quite privileged to some extent that I don't include much biography in my life. Where I do include my biography about my details, about my family, about my children, about where I live and stuff, is in my newsletter. And there is a kind of detachment between when you're writing about something and seeing someone about it. I'm not doing videos of my children. I wouldn't do that. And I wouldn't do videos of myself, with at a Christmas meal. I might do a small kind of photo which doesn't give any details away, but I won't. I'm very fortunate that my content creation and my kind of personality exists as a subject and as a philosopher rather than my biography. Now, I know that some people would want me to be more biographical. They want to hear more about me. I'm very lucky that I can keep this kind of like I've got this professional face, like a teacher. I'm a teacher on Instagram, and then I can go home and have my home life and I turn off my phone. Although my wife would say I'm on my phone too much, but then that's the nature of my job. I say to her, and she says it's just an excuse, but that's our argument.
So I understand that there was some discomfort, but you play with it by how you created your persona, your online persona. So, and I think going to Big Thing was actually very natural, because in Big Thing, like, you did something out of I don't know, the scope of what you did before, but in the same time, you were still writing and you were still introducing the knowledge. So I wonder if there was, or are you planning on doing some extra thing? Because, as the content creator grows, and I imagine a lot of people have more questions, are more interested in you, we reach out to you to, listen to your
Yeah.
ideas and the way how you do business. Are you tempted to show more then, or do you
I am,
think
yes, I do want to. So, I mean, there are three ways I could really do that, really. One is, as you talked about earlier, this kind of in-person events. I thought about doing retreats, like having people paint, like we'll meet up in a big kind of, I don't know, house somewhere, and we do like a weekend where we talk philosophy, go for walks and stuff. That'd be very nice stuff. And, that would obviously be inevitably very personal. That'd be me there. That's one way of doing it. The other thing is I haven't really done a podcast, so I do interviews with people, but mostly the interviews get turned into an article and turned into a newsletter and turned into a video on Instagram. The audio is there to listen to in my newsletters, but they're not really podcasts. The other things I could turn into a podcast, which would involve necessarily more, as we're doing today. Already I've shared more about my life in here than I do in about 3 months of videos on Instagram. And where was that? So podcasts, yeah. And the third way is kind of doing more kind of like on YouTube, where I'd have to do longer videos, where I think it'd be harder to make something interesting which you're just about an idea without introducing your life a little bit. But yeah, podcast in person stuff is where I could go with that, really. and people do want it. I'm aware that people want it, and there would be potentially a commercial element to it. You know, if I'm giving you access to me, it sounds like I'm a celebrity, but I feel like all weird saying that. You know, get a weekend talking philosophy could be an idea, but at the moment, fingers crossed, touch wood, people seem to be liking it for what it is. And in some ways, I can't go too far because people like it in maybe because I don't have. Some people like it because I don't have too much personality in it. A lot of people message me, for example, to say that they like the fact that it's not kind of like all me. It's not kind of very fast and frenetic and busy. And it's not, I'm also not opinionated about it. Like I will share like Burke, who's the father of conservatism one week, and Thomas Paine, who's like the father of liberalism and the left the next week. And I don't, and I, in an ideal world, people don't know where I stand. So I have, like, actually about 3 weeks ago, I got, within literally a day, this is like, I'm not even making this up as an example, I had 2 angry messages from people. One person said, why is it that you always attack atheists? Well, you're obviously a Christian, you're obviously atheistic and using a platform against us. And then on the same day, a Christian was saying, why is he always misrepresenting Christianity, and you're always kind of like, you're obviously an atheist and you've got your loads of agenda. Now, in some ways, that's quite a compliment. Obviously, I don't like angry messages, and I kind of deleted both. But, you know, in some ways, it's quite a compliment that people don't know where I stand on religion, and I don't on atheism and politics, because I think if they did, you would start to read more into what I'm writing and what I'm saying.
Okay, I was just wondering, like, because obviously there's a lot to explore when you're talking about, you know, you being a philosopher. In one of your interviews, well, first of all, you called yourself a philosophy magpie, I think, which kind of illustrates what you were talking about just now.
That was a philosophy break, yeah.
Yeah. You also mentioned in another interview that you are now exploring the philosophy of anything and everything. And I just love this concept so much because, you know, it's obviously now not just talking about or like explaining Aristotle or Plato, but you are now talking about the philosophy of cringy jokes. You're now talking about the philosophy of ethics, application to, well, that's my personal favorite, to technology. Like, should driverless cars have consciousness, or should it be ethical to create an artificial DNA? You know, those sorts of things. So now that it's quite a broad, vast universe of things that you're exploring from a philosophy perspective, what is your creative process like? How do you make sure that your, well, let's call it a creative identity, remains consistent if you are going so far and wide with what you're actually talking about?
This is a really difficult one. It's something I wrangle with in my own head quite a lot, actually, because, you know, I'm a philosophy page, and I think that the reason people like me is that I'm quite academic, I'm quite reputable, and I talk about some significant and serious things as well as other things as well. So I am constantly debating within myself about how much I should do this proper, deep philosophy, epistemology, truth, you know, good and bad, and how much I should look at things like, you know, like cringy jokes and did philosophy of sex last week, for example, or Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And yeah, exactly. Which are fun and they're interesting. And also, you know, in a very cynical way, I know things which are going to do well on social media and things which won't do well on social media. And I am trying to oscillate between the two. So I'm trying to do a bit of both. For example, so next week, or actually coming up this week, well, actually when this comes out, it'll be in July, but I'm going to do a post on logic and Frege. And I know for a fact that is not going to be popular because people don't like logic and Frege. But I'm actually starting the video saying, look, guys, I can't call myself a philosophy page if I don't talk about this. I can't forever talk, because there are philosophy pages out there which do very well, which entirely talk about Kafka, Nietzsche, Camus, and Slavoj Žižek. And that's it. You know, A, they're all white men, and B, they're all kind of like occupying one very small niche of philosophy, which kind of like rotates around absurdism, nihilism, and existentialism and stuff. And that's fine. And I know that is very popular on social media, particularly with the 18 to 25-year-old men, and that's fine. But I don't think I could call myself a philosophy page if I didn't go broader than that. But of course, I could go broader still. And this is where I am conscious of my own blind spots as well, that I am educated within a Western institution, philosophical institution. And so my knowledge is entirely skewed within the Western philosophical canon. And that's always the way it's going to be. And so I'm conscious that my page, which is called a philosophy page, does skew entirely toward Western philosophy. And that's because, you know, that's my knowledge, and that's what I know. Basically, I went to university, and I studied for a long time, and so it takes me very less time to try to do a video about those than to do one about Vedas, the Vedic philosophies, or to do about Islamic philosophy, or even like, you know, indigenous culture philosophies and stuff. Because I would need to know the entire background philosophy or the stew of philosophy, which gives life to those philosophies more. And there are philosophy pages out there, and it sounds like such a cop out. Which when people ask me sometimes, like, why don't you do more Indian philosophy? And I'll say, right, there is this really good page over here which does do Indian philosophy. Go over there and look at them. And they're not as popular as me, and they're not as successful as I am, whatever. And that might be because they don't do it in the same way, or it might be people are uninterested in Indian philosophy. But that's just what I've got to do, because that's just my limitations, and people seem to be drawing towards it. So the simple answer is, yeah, so roughly speaking, I still appeal to the masses. I did 3 out of 4 of my videos will be an attempt to get, popularity, but 1 in 4, 25%, whatever, will be something I know is going to tank in terms of views, but I need to appeal to that base. If that makes sense, the deep, intense philosophical view.
This is the trade-off you actually make, like, consciously. So you decide, okay, this is important. I still want to push it. I still want to make people aware of those concepts, but I know that it will reach only, I don't know, hardcore fans. Or
yeah, it will be. Yeah, it's not probably as conscious as 25%, if I'm honest. It's probably a case of, like, I feel like, oh yeah, it's been a few weeks now since I've done anything which is really rigorous philosophy, like Philosophy 101. Let's go back. Actually, that's why Frege's coming out this week. Actually, I feel like that right now. I've done a lot of is it philosophy posts kind of recently, so I kind of want to do a proper, deep, intense philosophy post just to kind of remind people that what I'm doing. But of course, we're talking about the business models and stuff like that. There is no way, I get, let's say, an average of my post view an average about 150,000 views, which is great. This is nice, and they get me more followers, and they do quite well. But what you don't know is who are viewing those videos, and that's probably more important about the business model, because what I do is my Instagram is essentially a shopfront about people then email me later on and say, I want to talk to you about this, I want to talk to you about that, and stuff, that, the other. But if I'm doing a proper philosophy post, like an intense philosophy post, it might be someone out there that really enjoyed that post, and they are the ones who emails me and says, like, do you want to do a collaboration, or can I work with Big Think, or can I, how can I buy your book? And in some ways, that matters more, obviously, than just like 150,000 more views. I'd rather get 2 or 3 people who are really interested in doing something with me, or as a shopfront, than getting 100,000 more people who maybe, or 10 more followers, whatever, and stuff. So doing proper philosophy is what yeah, exactly. And doing the proper philosophy is what gives me the rigor and give me my reputation of my label as well. And that applies to Big Think as well. And it applies to a lot of our articles. We do fun articles and slightly sillier articles, but we also do very intense neuroscience and astrophysics and philosophy. And it is important that we have this brand, a strength of brand, a depth of brand. And I hope Mini Philosophy has that depth of brand as well, that people feel as though this is someone who's doing proper philosophy. And if it goes too long, if I spend too long in the Kafka, Nietzsche, Camus, Slavoj Žižek shallow pool, then people will start to be like, well, maybe, I don't want to follow this guy. It's like when you
I
binge
think there
on
will
KFC,
be some tears. There will be some tears after watching this episode. Some people, in love with Nietzsche or Kafka will say, "What? What is this?"
Yeah, well, no,
How could he?
Yeah,
But it's very much aligned with my next question. It's actually lovely, because I wanted to ask you. So you made a video when you talk about strange experiences. I think it was related to the work of Claire Dederer.
Oh yes, strange experience. Yes, yeah, that was a great interview. I loved her. That was really good.
Sorry. And that was the thinking, like, if you do a lot of research, you spend a lot of time, much more than your viewers. Yeah, like they have the few seconds of what you spend days on your whole career on. And then I imagine if and I wonder if you spend so much time, and sometimes you learn background, the history of the philosopher, of the thinker, and you might learn that you don't like them actually. How does it change your perception and your like attitude towards creating content about those people? Like, doesn't it bother you at all?
Weirdly enough, I'm doing a post about this literally next week, because Nietzsche, and I'm doing a post on Nietzsche, and because Nietzsche talks about this, he said that philosophy essentially it comes down to autobiography, that all philosophers essentially are representing their own ideas, and they're calling it the human condition, they're calling it, absolute truth, and actually it's not, it's just what they think. But yes, the common question about problematic philosophers, I mean, there's kind of 2 questions really about Kant with Black Clay Dederer example about stained art, about enjoying the work of an art. Is it bad in itself to read the philosophy or read the artist? That's one question. And is it bad to also to support that person? But because by buying their books or by watching their movies or watching their Instagram, whatever, you are kind of supporting their lifestyle and encouraging them to do it. Now, obviously, that's not really an issue for Aristotle, who was a misogynist and was a racist. But because he's dead, 250, 2,500 years, a bit less than that, but so I don't need to worry about that. But then someone like Kant, likewise, Kant, I don't think, unless the Kant estate are benefiting from it, I don't think they are. I can buy a book of Kant, David Hume, similarly, who definitely both did say some problematic things, and John Stuart Mill, whatever and stuff. But then we're coming into modern times, and I think now if a philosopher says something really reprehensible, and you are buying their books or buying their articles, and you are funding their lifestyle, you're supporting them, and that's one bad moral thing. But then, can you enjoy them in yourself? That's a different question in terms of their philosophy, because I think philosophy is quite good at being compartmentalized. So Immanuel Kant, for example, I will recognize him as one of the greatest philosophers in the history of philosophy. He was a genius, and some of the stuff he said about metaphysics and morals and philosophy of religion were brilliant, and politics as well. But he has these strands of very explicit racism, where he refers to people of certain nations with words I can't even use them on this podcast now, because they're N words that we wouldn't use today. And he talks about inferior and superior races and inferior and superior rationality entirely on racial and ethnic lines and stuff. And that's obviously problematic, and it's obviously racist. The question is, does that stain his other philosophy? To some extent, it might with Kant, because Kant's philosophy is built up entirely on the idea of the rationality of humans. And if he's in his other breath saying, well, actually, these humans over here aren't entirely rational, the logical conclusion of that is that they aren't entirely human, which is obviously a desperately dangerous and dehumanizing and thing, which has led to all sorts of leads to the gates of Auschwitz, that kind of logic. So so in that problem, that issue, it is a problem, but that doesn't mean we can't also appreciate his moral philosophy and his epistemology and what he's done with philosophy of religion, because it is also good in itself. Because they're called ad hominems, really. You're attacking the man rather than their argument. Sometimes, it's man in that case, sometimes it does make sense, because if you are attacking their life and what they do, then it obviously reflects in their beliefs and what they're saying elsewhere. But by and large, I still enjoy the works of most philosophers who are stained in that way. John Stuart Mill, David Hume, and Kant and Aristotle, they're all four of my favorite philosophers, annoyingly. And even Simone de Beauvoir as well. She slept with her students. I think above the age of consent, but it's still definitely a power dynamic there, and it's still what we consider to be inappropriate these days. So yeah.
How did you find your way into philosophy? Like, was there a Jonny Thomson-like figure in your, university times that made you really excited? I mean, and passionate about philosophy?
Yeah, well, it starts before for university, I think. If you're at university studying a subject, it probably means that something's happened. And I mean, two answers really. The first is that my parents are psychologists, and psychology, and no kid really wants to do what their parents does, but also you're slightly attracted to it. So I've always liked psychology, but I can't go to university to do psychology because my parents are doing it. What do you do? Let's do philosophy. It's slightly the next lane over, but it's not quite. And the other reason, I got taught by a really, really good teacher who really made the subject come alive. A guy called Reverend Pete, and he just really got me. Objectively, if I look back now, having been a teacher for 10 years and stuff, I actually think he wasn't particularly great objectively as a teacher, but he got me. He understood me very well, and he knew what I needed to do. He knew when to, to say the hard word, to use a stick, and he knew when to coax and persuade by using the carrot and stuff. And he was really good for that. And also he facilitated great discussions. I remember that classroom particularly was really good for discussions. And to this day, even in my mini philosophy and when I used to be a teacher as well, I really thought that discussion process was such a big part of doing philosophy that actually, in some ways, that's why the 90-second reels is quite beneficial. That I do the reel and then it's like, go away, you can kind of talk about it. And I think a lesson without talking about it is not philosophy, because I'm very much signed up to the view where philosophy is a form of therapy for a lot of people, and can be a form of therapy. That when you talk and when you unpack ideas, you kind of reveal some things. But yeah, that's my long answer again. And I know you've got a long list of questions, and so I've got to stop giving you 10-minute answers to things.
No, please keep going.
We love them. We love them. Let's turn back to the business side of things, because I'm a business person. I usually work with big businesses, but very often when I just enjoy someone's work, I don't think about the business model. And actually, only when preparing to this episode, I went to Big Think to check how they make money. So I said, there's almost no ads. And then I noticed, okay, they have this business offering. So they have the flywheel of creating super interesting content, including yours. I started reading them because of you, so they should pay you some bonus for me.
I'll let them know. Yeah, there you go. One more person.
So
Look at that.
look at that. And then I noticed, okay, so they're creating this super amazing, good quality content. They push it in multiple channels, and then they have the brand, recognizable brand. And then if you have your business, you will go towards the masterclass like offering they have on the website. I wonder how it works for you, if you can share, like where does the money coming from in your business model?
Essentially, they're similar in some respects. In that, what I do with Instagram is a shop front. I like to call it a shop front, or like those displays outside on the high street. You're putting stuff out, and then people will then come into the shop. Once you're in the shop, they can buy other things. And for me, the things that I need them to buy are essentially my books, and also to go to Big Think, which is they're my employer. They pay me a salary and stuff. So I need to say, right, go to there, and then from there, obviously Big Think have their own revenue streams and stuff, which is probably beyond my ability to talk about too much. But for me, the books are the biggest avenue of revenue. And I have often thought about, if I wasn't with Big Think, if I wasn't going to getting a salary, what would be the other revenue streams and stuff? If I was just a content creator. Only now, with about 620,000 followers on Instagram, basically all platforms got 1 million in total, I would say. Only now are they beginning to get to the stage where I could make a living off those on their own. I don't think a lot of people appreciate how many followers you have to have, particularly in my sector. I think it might be a bit different if you are in the well-being or the fitness or the cars, in a very lucrative sector, but particularly in just education, smart ideas and talking to camera sector, you have to get quite a lot of followers before you're getting some sponsored posts. But now I'm getting quite a few sponsored posts for people. I'm working with a company called Ground News, who are a media outlet, and also Headway occasionally, and they sponsor posts. But the other thing I think a lot of people will be surprised to learn is that you don't actually get paid really per views often. So TikTok and Facebook and YouTube do. They pay me. I'm not really big on YouTube, but they do pay me on TikTok and Facebook. But it's not a lot. Again, you have to be getting, every video has to be getting more than 500,000 views to be making a salary out of that on any of those platforms. And I don't think of anyone who's getting 500,000 views on every video who don't themselves already have millions of followers on their channels, at which point they're probably getting other revenue streams anyway. So those companies are paying money to creators, but it's not enough to live off. You do need these brand collaborations if you are a content creator, and you do need, or what I'm doing is using a shop front and for my books, buy my books. And I mean that in two ways, really. One is literally go and buy my books, please. If I'm reading this, please buy my books. That would be great. But it's also in the sense that when I, for
guys,
example,
if you listen to us, please
Yeah.
go
buy my books. Buy my books.
Yes.
That'd be great. Please buy loads of them. Yeah, and great Christmas presents, birthday present, bar mitzvah presents, whatever. The sad truth is today, if you want to write a book in the non-fiction space, you either need to be a really big name in your field, like Professor for 20 years, it's got a really big new idea, or you need to have a big platform.
Professors also have a platform. I would say professors also have a platform, because then you are a student of theirs and you need to buy this book.
Exactly. And often they can get it on syllabuses.
Yeah.
So long story short. So, I mean, as content creators themselves, you probably get paid very little. Collaborations allow some creators to make a living, but mostly, in my experience, content creators use their social media as a shop front for
Remind
books,
everyone
buying a
how
course,
long. Yeah, remind everyone how long it took you, because you started, I remember you started with only static posts, I think, and then you moved to video. So how long was the journey for you, actually?
In total, it's been 7 years since I first started Mini Philosophy. 7 years. But yeah, I mean, yeah, as you're right, it was entirely static posts. And even back then, 7 years ago, static posts with text weren't particularly popular. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, the real phenomena completely took off. I think Instagram have explicitly said now that if you just post one picture with text on, it's going to not be shown to people. Carousels and reels. Reels first and carousels number 2 is what you need to do. And so that's when, so in terms of like that, my platform has expanded to where it is today is probably shorter. It's only about 2.5 years, 3 years. And that is fast for someone in the content space. Like, I know that people who've got the millions and millions of followers, either they're celebrity already, they're already singers, they're already authors, they're already movie stars, whatever. But to be a content creator in itself, it does take a lot of time, a lot of effort. I mean, still, I would say, like, for me, and I think it's true for most content creators, is that it's only a handful, less than 10 videos account for probably about 70-80% of my audience, of my followers. Like, so I've had, if I get one video which gets, like, let's say 1.5 million views, I did one recently on the Nietzsche thesis, got about that one video got me something about 50,000 followers. So if you do, like, that 10 of those, you've already got 500,000 followers. So it is, the viral video is so important to followers. But But also, inversely, I have to say that followers aren't as important as they once were. Like, followers themselves don't really matter as much as the actual content you're making, because these platforms, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, aren't sending your content out to all of your followers. They send it out to a portion of them, and if it does well, they send it out to more, and they send it out to non-followers as well. But not a lot of people know that. So collaborators and publishers and Netflix, if they're listening, my follower count is really important. It's really good.
The problem with viral moments, though, is their unpredictability, right? And it's one of the greatest marketing enigmas, I would say, is how to create more viral, culturally relevant moments that will actually hit the targets. And when we're talking about philosophy, it's just like my mind is exploding. Like, how do you make philosophy viral? That brings me to the next question of how do you actually measure the impact of what you're trying to do? Because when, like, from a marketing perspective, when we're talking about this, obviously the end game and the end point is sales. However, it gets more sophisticated than that, right? Because first you need to change the mindset of people of the category that you're talking to, because they're paying you not with the money per se, they're paying to you with their attention and time first and foremost. So you need to create something really intellectually sexy for them to actually, be a part of your funnel, and then in the end they will buy something off of you. So, like, if the end game here is actually making people think better, right? And not just buying the books or just signing up for your Instagram account, how are you making sure that's actually happening?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something close to my heart. I mean, when I'm talking about this in a more noble kind of guise, without talking about profit and making money out of it, I do genuinely see this as a project and as a hobby that I want to bring to people. I want to bring this kind of conversation to people. And for me, and this is not a popular answer, and some people will probably not like this, I often block a lot of people on my platform. And because if the commenters who are rude, who are obstinate, or add nothing at all of value to the philosophical conversation, I will block them. People who are like, why this is just pointless, this is why philosophers are unemployed, or you're talking nonsense, or they talk about me, you white bespectacled British bloke.
I loved it. I actually loved it. Let's go wild.
But my logic is that I'm not anti-free speech. Yeah, if they want to go away and make their own TikTok, Instagram, whatever, slagging off British people with glasses, whatever, do what you want. That's your life. You can do that. But in my mindset, I view it like a teacher still. I view that if I was teaching a class and there was one kid who was just screaming and just like insulting everybody else for getting involved, or making the entire atmosphere in the room poisonous, then I would get them out. I'll send them to the headmaster, or the headmaster might even expel them from the school, whatever. Because that then
users sent to headmaster. We need to actually really brand that label that users sent to headmaster. So
And so what happens now is that some people do say to me often in the message that they really like the fact that my comments are quite mature, they're quite intellectual. People have learned as much from the comment section as they have from my video, and I love that. I love the fact that it's becoming a space where people feel confident that they can talk. In fact, some people even said in the comments, I don't usually comment, but and if I see anyone who's being rude or offensive to them, I'll block them, because I think, right, fine, go somewhere else. There's more than enough places where you can be kind of poisonous and toxic if you want to, but I don't want this space to be that. I want it to be a mature and grown up and intellectual place to talk about ideas, not a owning YouTube porn kind of thing.
So technically it's like the intellectual quality of the engagements, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's I think that's true. And with that also becomes a certain kind of demographic, which is also, if we're really being cynical, is also probably more lucrative. Because if we're honest, the people who are screaming and swearing and using caps lock at each other are probably, they're 14-year-old kids, aren't they, somewhere, who haven't got much purchasing power. Actually, the people who are left over are probably the grown-ups in the room, really.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's very much connected. I like how this conversation unfolds, because as you are reading in our minds, because one of the last questions we have for you is, I think David Perel mentioned that we are moving from age of distribution to the age of engagement. And you kind of also add a different layer to it. It's also not only engagement as a final metric, but as quality engagement. This is what you are introducing to the market, that you look for quality engagement. And this is what you're actually promising to everyone who's reading and watching you and following you.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I agree with that to an extent. But of course, there is a danger in this, isn't there? The age of distribution had benefits in the sense that you were introduced to new ideas as well, and new voices and new people as well. Whereas now there's the risk of the echo chamber writ large, that I know, for example, what will do well, and I'll do those. And as I mentioned, if I just know that Camus, Dostoevsky, and Nietzsche and are going to do really well, I'll just do that all the time. And what happens over time is that all of the philosophy pages on the internet and on Instagram will be entirely about Dostoevsky and Camus and Slavoj Žižek, and that is kind of already what's happening. And then what will happen eventually, in some kind of horrible dystopian future of 30 years' time, people will say, Aristotle's not a philosopher, only Slavoj Žižek and Nietzsche and Dostoevsky are philosophers and stuff. And actually, the age distribution was good for that sense. It kind of but then of course it's not also democratic. It's very top down, and so the age of kind of engagement also responds to what people want and what people need. And I like to think I've kind of I do both. It's kind of who's leading who, is the cart leading the horse kind of thing. But I like to think that I listen to my audience, but also occasionally I'll introduce them to an idea they don't know about. But of course, an issue we haven't talked about, the elephant in the room, is that social media is still very much locked down by rules and laws. There are certain things I will not talk about on social media, partially because they're too inflammatory. They'll do too much for my brand, which I don't want to touch, and also partially because I just can't talk about them. On this podcast, I'm not sure I can talk about them. I'm going to mention them, right? Suicide, can't talk about that. Even mental health, depression, can't talk about that really. Even things like sex. When I did that sex newsletter, I had to massively grade it and stuff. They're talking about sex and libido and all that kind of stuff. No, it'll get shut down. But I like to think in my space that I treat them in a grown up and sensible and mature way. But they are they're like that radioactive rod in The Simpsons that he's holding from afar, aren't they? And you don't want to touch them. But then in some ways that's bad, because those are the kind of things we need to have important conversations about. But also,
maybe that's an idea for the podcast. Maybe that's an idea for the podcast.
That is a good podcast. But then, yes. But then I'm also aware that maybe social media isn't the place to have those conversations. Maybe it is in the living room and in the pub with real life people.
Okay, before my final question, there's just a quick one as the follow up to what you're saying now. So, social media is functioning according to certain laws, as in the great algorithm defines what you're doing. That's what kind of dilutes the picture of how you're working with, again, philosophical topics, right? So you're trying to do something lighthearted to actually bring the people in, and then occasionally you would do something like the heavyweight stuff. Do you think the universities still, as the main channel of actually doing heavyweight philosophy to certain groups of people, could actually learn something from this social media bonanza to actually lower down the entry point into philosophy? Because it still feels quite tough and elite to actually go and study philosophy and to understand it better.
It's difficult, because in some respects, yes, I agree with you. I think what I'm doing is brilliant, because I think that, a broad range of ideas talked about in a mature and sensible way is really useful and important to everybody. But also, I'm conscious that it's philosophy of a small p sometimes, not philosophy of a big P, in the sense that you do need to go away and read philosophers at some point. And then when you do so, in fact, I've had this when I was a teacher, I had it, and I have it now also on my social media, that people will say, right, can you recommend a book to me to go to read? And I say, yeah, fine. Go read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Go and read Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Go and read kind of like Thomas Nagel's, Mortal Questions, whatever. And then, whoa, okay, suddenly they're using these massive words, complicated arguments, and it's completely in their face. And it's well, they disengage from it. And so in some respects, a good philosophy course is important in that it holds your hand through that. It kind of introduces you to, and that's what I used to do as a teacher. I'd introduce them to the concepts, the underlying ideas, the words being used and stuff. All the while I'm explaining it in my own voice as well and in modern terminology. But I think people do need to engage with the topic on its own merits as well, because otherwise you will lose the depth. You'll lose the nuance of it and stuff. Even something like Aristotle, he's very readable, I think, and his ideas are very modern in some respects. Virtue theory applies very much one today, but his entire philosophy is stewed within the Greek way of seeing the world, and you need to understand that as well. And philosophy is difficult as a subject, so I think it belongs as a subject. But also, I think what I'm doing is really important, like philosophy of a small p, which essentially just is what I like to call deep and meaningful conversations, like having deep and meaningful conversations. The 11 o'clock in the night thing when, most people have gone from the party and it's you and a few mates sitting around the table watching the sunset. You're all a little bit drunk, someone, says, right, guys, do you believe in God? And oh, okay, right. And then you end up talking until 3 a.m. And that is, that's the Greek symposium.
That's the party plan, yes.
From our other podcast, actually, to build build meaningful relationship with someone, someone made a research that you need at least 3 hours of conversation. So just, like
I believe
our meeting for a quick coffee doesn't build a strong bond as it does,
I believe that.
3 hours.
Yeah, but the thing about the internet, it's so superficial. There's this great theory which originated on Reddit originally. It's this conspiracy theory. It's called the dead internet theory. And the idea is the internet is full of people who are either bots or people who we have now learned to talk in this very safe, very boring, very weirdly internet language that no one is themselves. And the only place it's slightly pushed back on now is on Substack, where people are starting to talk like human beings. Like on Twitter, people are screaming at each other. You don't do that in real life. On Instagram and on TikTok, people are like, "Oh, I love this. It's amazing."
Substack even more harsh. I found Substack comments sometimes more harsh than I found Instagram
No, so I meant
comments,
to say the actual newsletters.
But I like it.
Yeah. I meant to say the actual newsletters that they're written. At least the ones I follow are written like real people. It's like you feel like you're actually reading somebody talking like a real person at you. Whereas the dead internet theory is kind of saying that no one talks like a real person on the internet anymore. And that's because it's public and it's scared that if you talk like a real person, you expose yourself to so many accusations, and that doesn't exist in real life, particularly with a small group of close-knit friends, which I think are so important. And that, it's not a safe space in the very cringy modern sense of not offending anybody, but it is a safe space in the sense that you don't feel judged.
Yeah.
And I think that is a prerequisite to having a good philosophical conversation, that it's a safe space in that all questions and all points are valid up to the point, obviously, but and that lack of judgment is important to a good conversation, I think.
Final question about something that is not existent in real life, luckily. To what extent has AI impacted what you do and how exactly? And if there was a syllabus, a course you needed to design on AI plus ethics plus philosophy, what would that be?
Yeah, massively. It massively has influenced me, obviously, but not negatively yet. I'm very lucky that I'm still a writer and I'm still a content creator in the age of AI. At the moment, it's a tool that I use and I add into my repertoire, not dissimilar to Microsoft Word spell checker or even just a word processor generally, really. I use it for researching, I use it for Googling, but I still have to fact check it. I still have to kind of make sure it does things right. I use it for an idea board, ideas for a title or a word that I don't quite know. So to my mind, it's a really efficient, really useful Google at the moment for me. It does exactly what I want, because Google's always been, I don't think we've realized for so long how Google has been not that good at what you actually wanted to do. You'll type in a question and you'll get the same hits. It'll be Wikipedia or TripAdvisor or stuff, and you don't actually get your answer. Whereas now I think ChatGPT is actually making you realize how shit Google has been for so long, actually. And if teaching people the biggest issue for me though is content theft. Ironically, it's not the AI itself; it's AI avatars or AI stuff stealing your thing and bots. So there's this thing at the moment where content creators, people are stealing our faces and they're putting them, and people are speaking as if they are us. Lucky it hasn't happened to me, touch wood, yet. And they're even stealing the same script. So the same script from the same avatar, but in like a different background, is being posted on social media and stuff like that. So it wouldn't be a big lift for social media algorithms to insist on a human verification process. Not like so in like LinkedIn, for example, asks people to put their password details in to guarantee that they're authentic people, because they're worried about bots as well, because LinkedIn depends upon genuine connections with genuine people. It wouldn't be a big lift for social media to do that. But the reason why I don't think they've done it yet is I don't think they want people and investors to realize how many bots there actually are on these social media places. I think if people realize how full bots, how many bots are on these places, they would be disheartened. So, but fingers crossed, hopefully they'll bring in a human verification process soon.
We have final 3 questions to you, and that's the questions we just want one-line answer. So that will be the huge challenge for you right now. But let's try it. Let's try it.
Really sorry.
First money you ever earned?
Teaching English as a foreign language when I was 16.
Yeah. One big thing you hate about being creator?
Yeah, being addicted to it, basically. The addiction. I feel like the addiction is a necessary evil of the business. That I am addicted to it, and that is a problem. But I can't think of an easy workaround while my life is depending on it, basically. So yeah, sorry, that's a gloomy answer.
Okay.
That's it.
Could you name 3 creators, authors, whatever, in the creator zone, people that you follow and like? And would you like to recommend them to our listeners?
Yeah, there's one called Art, History, Philosophy. Actually, sorry, Wasp attacking me. He's one of the first people who ever followed me and gave me a big shout out, and he's great. I love him. McKellen, he does theology, and he does it really well. He does fact checking and people, and also Rachel Barr, who's a mate of mine. She does neuroscience, and she's just great. She's one of these off the cuff, spontaneous, slightly chaotic, but an incredible egghead. She's so clever and brilliant and lovely. So that's it, really.
Awesome. Jonny, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. We now love philosophy.